Within the South African government, responsibility for climate policy is an increasingly congested, if not contested, space. To date, the Department of Water and Environmental Affairs has laid responsibility for both domestic policy developments and for the country's participation in international climate negotiations. Yet departments such as Treasury and Energy have also developed key proposals related to South Africa's climate future. Hello and welcome to Climate Change Perspectives. I'm Eleni. Giokos. Joining me as per usual is my guest host, Daniel Kinnear, Senior Executive Associate at the Africa Strategy Group. And tonight we take a closer look at local government's perspective on climate change with South African Minister for Water and Environmental Affairs, Mrs. Edna Molewa. A warm welcome to both of you. Thank you so very much for joining us. Minister, let's start off with you. The National Climate Change Response Policy has been approved by Cabinet. Of course, an unprecedented move, but just in time for, of course, COP17. How do you plan to tackle things going forward, given the fact that the two greatest emitters in the country, being Eskom and Sasol, are of strategic importance to the country's economy?
Let me start by saying that, the South African program really entailed the formulation of climate change policy, as well as the driving the education aspect to everybody who may not have even heard a thing about climate change. But more importantly, also at the same time, developing our own mandate. Now, with regards to the policy, I must say that it has been consultative, a process, and it's not just been consultative to the external departments, but also, stakeholders, but also within government departments as well. So what we have today, as passed by Cabinet, is actually a product of the people of South Africa, inclusive of the departments like energy, like minerals, like transport, agriculture, those key departments that were participating. And in formulating their responses as well, because this is actually a response policy, in formulating their responses, all of us had to say, what will I do and contribute as a contributor to the emissions right now to cut these carbon emissions. Energy has got their IRP plan, which is an integrated resource plan for energy, but at the same time cutting carbon emissions. That plan is also building in alternative energy throughout the process up to 2020. So even their calculations on how they are going to, Sasol, Eskom, and other sectors like transport, to be helping us to cut the carbon emissions. All that work has now been calculated meticulously, scientifically, and now embodied in this policy framework.
But if we calibrate all the inputs, which has been a long time coming and a lot of work, there's always that danger that the coordination, the monitoring, slips through the gaps. We don't have the equivalent of a national environmental agency that will have oversight, and this falls within your department. How do you ensure that everyone of departments of government and its agencies are pulling at the same time in the same direction to achieve the fulfillment of this policy?
Well, it is actually very good now to actually state that in South Africa in 2009, the presidency and all our leaders and people of South Africa have actually realized the need for us to monitor everything that we do, play real clear oversight. And that process led to a situation where there were 10 outcomes structured. We are outcome number 10. Outcome number 10 is environmental issues. This climate change policy, with all that goes with it in terms of monitoring, are actually all embodied in the deliverables under that outcome number 10. So presidency monitors us, even though we don't have an agency, but we do have a special department specifically established to actually monitor. And it monitors everybody. President doesn't just look at the reports, he even goes out to plans, to communities, to check what has been written, if what has been written in these reports are actually true. So already in outcome number 10, we have built in the aspects of climate change response policy, coming from energy, coming from transport, coming from all over. All those things on a quarterly basis. There are reports that are coming The green, amber, red colors are actually indicated as to how we are performing. So this is actually monitoring.
Minister, how would you say, what is the impact going to be on Sasol and Eskom? And I allude to the fact again that they are the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases in South Africa. What kind of regulation are you going to be implementing to watch them closely? And here we are in a country where we're so reliant on coal, one of the most dirtiest resources on the planet. We're still building coal-fired power plants, and we are now embarking perhaps on a nuclear strategy. But how do we balance that between socioeconomic responses and ensuring that we also take care of the environment at the same time?
Well, the very important thing I think that we should continue to recognize is that within the trajectory of carbon emission reduction in South Africa, there's an element inbuilt of allowing space for development, but also secondly with the necessary resources. That's now technology, capacity, you name it, even finances, even South Africa. That's at the end. At the end of our commitment, we say that space to develop is specifically worked in there to recognizing that we still need to actually have energy in South Africa. There are still communities that do not have energy. So the development path and growth path does not have to be enemy to environment. So that balance has got to be struck, and it's for that reason that we actually clearly calculated meticulously, as I said, the time period that we need to actually reduce the backlog of the energy needs, the backlog of service delivery needs, but also at the same time growing our economy. Now, with regards to the issue of Eskom and Sasol, this has not been said, and it's not said more often. And I need to actually clarify that with the new power stations made of coal that we are erecting, we've actually calculated at the end of the development of these power stations, the new ones, Medupi, there are going to be some power stations that have been as old as I don't know what, but very, very old, that has to be decommissioned. So it's not additional coal into the atmosphere, but also the new power stations that are being brought on board are actually using different technology, pulling some gases in, away from the atmosphere, even at the level of manufacturing energy, as we do. So the technological innovation that's available to South Africa, that's available to the world now, actually fortunately helps us to actually minimize the emissions of a gas. We are very, very careful in that, and the Department of Environmental Affairs, by the way, helps formulate this policy. Over and above the team at Presidency that does the monitoring, we are in our own rights the monitor as well, and that has actually been built into the law. The law, National Environmental Management Act, Waste Management Act, there are several acts, actually Air Pollution Act. They are inbuilt in those laws. The right for the Department of Environmental Affairs to actually have teeth and actually even stop any development if there's pollution in the air.
But talking about, I beg your pardon, but talking about teeth, governments can create the framework, the context, the policy, but government cannot do everything. What is, in your opinion, the extent of the response from business on technologies, on finance, that could create sustainable jobs, that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions? How have you seen them come into the party, and to what degree have they come to the party in South Africa to work with government?
It's a very good question indeed. In the first instance, as we were formulating this climate change response policy, we were working very close with business. I met them on several occasions as well. In fact, one of the reasons for this short delay is because business had to have some comfort asking certain questions about whether they will have adequate funds and time and space to actually make changes in their own establishments. So with that in mind, we've been working together, and we've been able to accommodate the issues that they've raised. Now, they are coming on board in terms of the policy response, but also acting on the policy response. The second area is related to what I really say my praises to all the time, even before this policy framework was actually finalized. We had the top 200 companies in South Africa that are listed at Johannesburg Stock Exchange, plus, already involved in the Carbon Disclosure Project. They were disclosing, we need to move on to do the storage and capture and storage. So already there are changes, and those are the likes of Eskom, those are the likes of Sasol, those are the likes of many other companies, Coca-Cola and them. I mean, there are many here in South Africa. They are really moving. And I think that we need to be proud of them and say, yes, indeed, we have partners in them. Society, civil society is moving in a small way in adaptation. Ordinary communities are also moving. I think we're really getting in the right direction.
Minister, also just looking at the National Climate Change Response Policy and the fact that it actually just came in a breath before COP17, we have received quite a bit of criticism with regards to that. Tell us about the intricacies in terms of ensuring that the policy that has been created now is far more cohesive than what we've ever seen in South Africa. And this is why perhaps we lagged from the other countries in terms of preparing for COP17.
Well, let me say that we were actually preparing for COP17, formulating policy as a plus, just as a statement to be made that we are really serious with cutting the carbon emissions. Not that we are quite chasing this. We want to react. We could have even done it a year before, even if we were not a host. But indeed, it is necessary to say that the very original document, which was a green paper, had some statements made, which we actually, and this is the good and the beauty of consulting and getting people to participate. People said, but these are, it looks like shopping lists. It's not really quite actions that we see tied to anything. And on that note, we have really had to go back and say, how do we now tie down to every sector, to a particular carbon reduction, emission reduction, and even linking the policies to other policies that are there, like, for instance, the new growth path, for instance, the new industrial policy, and so on. All these now have to speak to other, and they are made to speak to each other. Not only that, but also intersectoral, interdepartmental, interspherical applications. The criticisms came, and the beauty of it is that we are now actually moved on to rectify all those. So the policy current actually is as integrated as ever, and we believe that if actions can take place together simultaneously, it'll take us a whole long way indeed.
We're going to a short commercial break. More on climate change policies with South African Minister Edna Molewa when we return. Stay tuned.